Welcome to our October in-person Hot Topics, and I say in-person because you all are in the room, but I also want to welcome our online guests. We have to our digital audience as well. Our recording will be available on the LWBOC YouTube channel and our Hot Topics webpage, so make sure to visit the webpage if you want to take a listen after the fact. If everyone would please silence their cell phones, we want to make sure that we are giving respect to our guests who will be on screen and in person. So I'll give everyone a moment. Yeah. Alrighty. And with that, we are going to begin our program with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I ask that everyone please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with all that is going on, if we would please take a moment of silence for the state of Israel and all the lives impacted and lost by the current war. Alrighty. Well, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge, highlight, and thank our platinum sponsor, Climate First Bank, and our bronze sponsors, Lynn and David Barrelsman, and Voting Voices, which include Michelle Levy, Lori and Richard Wack, and Charlie Williams. Thank you all so much. Will our sponsors please stand to be recognized? As our platinum sponsor, Climate First Bank is honored to sponsor today's Hot Topic Luncheon. As a mission-driven organization, Climate First Bank offers a range of products that empower customers to use finance as a force for good. Recently announced at Climate First Bank, we choose the rate and you choose the product. Earn 5.344% APR on their special choice money market 15-month flex CD or a choice checking account. Speak to them right around the corner today about the impact of your banking products. Make sure to go see them out there, guys. That's a pretty good interest rate. If we want to take a moment to acknowledge our elected officials and anyone who has declared that he, she, they are running for office, if you would please come to the podium and announce yourselves, your name, what you're running for, or what office you sit in. And I ask that everyone please hold their applause until everyone has finished. Thank you. The podium's waiting for you all. Go. Yes. Right over here. Uh-oh.
What about now? Okay. My name is Stephanie Vanos, and I'm running for Orange County School Board District 6.
Let's hold. Hi, I'm Sheila DeCiccio, Vice Mayor, Winter Park, running for mayor in March. Thank you.
I'm Doug Walker. I'm a county judge here in Orange County. Good to see everyone.
Good morning. I'm Marty Sullivan. I'm a commissioner for the city of Winter Park.
Good afternoon. Morning, actually. My name is Carolyn Campbell, Supervisor Carolyn Campbell. I'm currently supervisor with Orange County Soil and Water Conservation District, and I will be running again 2024. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Todd Weaver. I'm a Winter Park City Commissioner. Thank you.
And good morning. Wes Hodge, former Democratic Party chair here in Orange County, candidate for supervisor elections.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Vickers, and I am running for public defender for Orange and Osceola County, which is the 9th Judicial Circuit. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm former State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. I am running for Florida Senate District 17, and I just won a lawsuit against the DeSantis administration in court.
Well, that applause worked out really well, I guess. If you want to continue our discussion this afternoon, we will have an extended discussion at Hot Topics Overtime immediately following the programming right next door at the library on the second floor from 1:15 to 2. And now to the good stuff. Our topic today is simply Maxwell and Maxwell. Unplugged, unfiltered, unscripted. As Susan mentioned, this is the largest Hot Topic event that we have hosted with 271 guests, so thank you all. It is clear evidence of the popularity of our guest speakers, Scott Maxwell and Representative Maxwell Frost, two Maxwells, two perspectives, and more issues than time. We intended for our speakers to have a lively and informative dialogue about current events, politics, and our community. But our U.S. Congressman Maxwell Frost, representing Florida's 10th Congressional District, has been summoned to D.C. this week, along with his entire caucus. Let's face it, Congress is in chaos, particularly over the speakership. Nonetheless, Scott and Maxwell strategized to still bring us Maxwell and Maxwell, unplugged, unfiltered, unscripted. Representative Frost will join via video. The popular and ever-entertaining friend of the league, Orlando Sentinel columnist Scott Maxwell, is here with us in person. He returns again to define and analyze the current hot mess that is Florida politics, and maybe national politics, but it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost and Orlando Sentinel journalist and columnist, Scott Maxwell. Just a little bit about our congressman. The first member of Gen Z to be elected to Congress, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, is committed to representing the people of his hometown in Orlando and Central Florida and being their voice in Washington, D.C. Congressman Frost is laser focused on working to deliver change and results on issues of gun reform, housing affordability, healthcare, abortion rights, LGBTQ plus rights, voting rights, transportation, justice reform, climate change, and more. That's a lot. As a young member of Congress and Afro-Latino, Congressman Frost brings a fresh, progressive perspective to an institution formerly out of reach for young, working Black and Latino Americans. Frost was adopted at birth and raised in the very community he now represents. His mother, a Cuban American, came to the U.S. during the freedom fight in the late 1960s and became a special needs teacher right here in Central Florida, inspiring his advocacy for supporting future generations through education. And his father, a full-time musician, taught Congressman Frost his love for music. He's a drummer, if you didn't know, giving him his first drum set and igniting his passion for the arts. As a former organizer, musician, and community activist, Frost was inspired to get to work at 15 years old after the tragic mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary claimed the lives of 26 innocent people. From that moment on, Frost dedicated his life to fighting against gun violence and empowering communities across Florida and the U.S. to get behind gun reform. Frost himself is a survivor of gun violence after witnessing a shooting in downtown Orlando. The experience only further committed Frost to fight for common sense solutions to the senseless loss of life through leadership roles at the ACLU and eventually March for Our Lives, where he served as National Organizing Director. Now, to Scott Maxwell. Scott Maxwell is a Metro columnist for the Orlando Sentinel. He writes about Central Florida politics and whatever else catches his fancy. Scott particularly enjoys giving readers information they won't get elsewhere and shares the stories politicians would rather keep secret. Scott came to the Sentinel in 1998 and has penned a column since 2022. He's a married father of two and graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who loves to travel, exercise, and scary movies. It's a season for that, Scott. The journalist looking in and reporting on government and politics, and the new youngest congressman working within it all. They will share their views on the many issues that affect Florida and our community. Get ready to be shocked, get mad, laugh, and be energized for action all at the same time. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speakers. Scott, please join me to the podium.
Well, it is nice to be here, but let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way. You all came here to hear a hot, young, up-and-coming congressman and a crusty old newspaper guy. You guys got stuck with the crusty old newspaper guy. I don't think I've seen this much disappointment in one room since John McCain announced his running mate back in 2008. Last night, Maxwell was on Stephen Colbert. I was at my home looking up public records in my boxer shorts. You guys are stuck with the boxer shorts guy. I know everyone understands why Congressman Frost isn't here, and that's basically because Congress is a dumpster fire. As Tiffany mentioned, the last time I was here, the title of my discussion was Hot Mess. And since then, things have only gotten hotter and messier. Not only in DC, but I would submit in Tallahassee as well. I know we all understand why Maxwell isn't here. We can still be disappointed. I know I was, because I was counting on him doing the lion's share of the work today. And let's be honest, the only real reason I'm here is because the league was looking for a creative naming title, and they thought Scott Maxwell, Maxwell Frost. I would have never been gladder that my first name was not DeSantis. That would have been awkward, let's be honest, the two of us up here together. I'm going to do best to fill the time, and we do have Congressman Frost today via video, and he's going to field a couple of the questions that I was going to ask him today that I went ahead and sent his way to Washington today. But I thought I would start by mentioning the time I first met now Congressman Frost, because it was an event centered around a cause that's important to him and that I know is important to you all at the league as well, gun violence. The time was early last year. We had just witnessed the horrific school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And I had just written a column about my reaction to the shooting and frankly how embarrassed I was about that reaction. And allow me to explain. A friend came up 2 days after the shooting and said to me, "Do you know what people are going to do in response?" And my first instinctive reaction was to laugh. As soon as I did it, I realized how crude it was and how heartless my reaction was. But at the same time, I just figured we had given up as a society on doing anything about gun violence and trying to stop the insanity. I mean, we did nothing after children were murdered in the hallways of Columbine. We saw kindergartners gunned down in their classrooms in Sandy Hook and did nothing. We saw high schoolers in our own state who were murdered in Parkland, and none of that was enough for this country to do anything meaningful about gun reform, so I just figured we'd given up. But then after scoffing at his question and feeling pretty gross about it, I decided I needed to talk to somebody who hadn't given up. And so I made a call to a guy named Fred Guttenberg. And some of you all may know Fred Guttenberg or recognize his name, but if you don't, his daughter Jamie was killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas that day. She was 14 years old. And Fred has fought every single day since she was killed. I counted on the day we spoke, and on that day, it was 1,563 days in a row. I can't imagine losing a child that way, nor could I imagine talking about it virtually every day for 1,500 days. So I got on the phone with Fred and basically asked him how he could continue to summon the energy to fight for the same cause, trying to roll the same rock up that same unyielding mountain every day. And Fred responded, "How could I not?" He said his daughter was the light of his life, a dancer who loved to laugh, someone who confronted bullies, and yet someone who would always and forever be 14. Fred stressed what every person in this room should know, and I think most people in this room do know, that gun violence that we have come to accept in this country as normal is not normal. This is not normal behavior in countries throughout the rest of the planet. Certainly not on a scale remotely close to what we have here. People in other countries don't see people slaughtered en masse at schools, in nightclubs, at concerts on a regular basis. So it's really inarguable that we're doing something different, something very wrong, and that innocent children are paying the price. Now, personally, I believe that root cause is a toxic mix of problems. It's not just one thing. It's including a woeful lack of mental health, where Florida ranks 49th or 50th, thank God for Mississippi in most state rankings when we do things like this. It's also a glorification and desensitization to violence, but we have to be clear that it is absolutely about guns. It is absolutely about guns. And the most twisted thing about all this is that virtually everyone in this country agrees. On the left, on the right, on the really key issues like universal background checks and not allowing high-capacity weapons that were created for only one purpose, for mass slaughter in short amounts of times, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, to the tune of 80%, even members of the NRA, for the most part, agree that these things should not happen. But we don't make those changes, no matter how many times kids get slaughtered. I thought I should give it up, or not should give up. I felt like I was pretty defeated. But after talking to Fred, I decided that if he could continue to fight for years on end with this tragedy of a very personal nature really still throwing through his veins, the least I could do. So I wrote that column. It was titled, "His Daughter Was Murdered. He Refuses to Go Numb." But then I did something I rarely ever do, and that was march. And one of the reasons I rarely do is I don't really think it's a journalist's job to march. I've got a platform to say what I want to say for most of the things. But then I decided, actually, let me change that. My wife and I decided that we should go and participate in the March for Our Lives, where I believe a number of you all were there. And if memory serves, the league was actually registering people to vote, which is really what it's all about. And that is where I met Maxwell, where he introduced himself as we were sort of rounding the eastern side of Lake Eola. And we talked about why he was running for office. And he ended up mounting one of the more impressive victories the region has seen in a while, defeating not one, mind you, but 2 former Democratic members of Congress were in that race. And I don't need to embarrass any of them, but I will. It was Alan Grayson and Corinne Brown that he beat. So this was a pretty significant victory that Maxwell Frost. So now he is a member of Congress. He's hanging out with Stephen Colbert, and you are sadly stuck with me. So I'm going to now turn this over to Maxwell, who has done a video. But before I do, I want to tell you that one of the things he's going to address are a couple of questions I asked him. And one was what I just talked to you about, gun violence. Specifically, whether he believes the newly created White House Office on Gun Violence, which he was part of. In fact, he was standing right between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they announced it in Washington, D.C. So I asked him if he thinks that's really going to make any difference. And the other thing I wanted to say, ask him about, is what he thinks about the future of Florida, because the Florida I see is getting redder and redder, and I know he's got a lot of hype nationally, but we haven't seen that translate into any voting here in Florida, so I asked him to address that, and now I will turn this over to the decidedly non-crusty Congressman Maxwell Frost.
Hello to the League of Women Voters and everybody at the event in Orlando. This is Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost, proudly representing Florida's 10th Congressional District, Central Florida, in the United States Congress. And it's amazing to be with y'all here virtually today. I want to apologize for not being there in person. I was actually very much looking forward to this event. It's not actually my fault that I'm not there. It's the fault of House Republicans who cannot get it together. And right about now, we're probably still figuring out who the next Speaker of the House is going to be, if not already done it. So I just wanted to first off thank everybody for being here, and hopefully we can have another event like this in the future in person. But I wanted to bring some greetings and speak to you a little bit about my time in Congress. And a huge shout out to Scott Maxwell, who I was supposed to have the conversation with. We will do this again in person in the future. We're committed to making sure that happens. I first met Scott Maxwell actually in person at a March for Our Lives protest. It was March for Our Lives Part 2 in the middle of my campaign. He was out there marching, and we spoke a little bit. And that reminds me so much of the whole reason I got involved in the politics in the first place. At the age of 15, when the Sandy Hook shooting happened, it was before a jazz band concert. I went to the Osceola County School for the Arts, where I studied jazz drums. Before every jazz band concert, my best friends and I would go to this Fridays across the street, load up on a ton of junk food, and we saw that on the television screen. The fact that somebody walked into an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, and murdered 20 children and 6 teachers. I went to DC for the memorial, and meeting the kids and the families and the teachers who had gone through that changed my life forever, and that's what put me into action. I remember I went straight home. I actually started collecting petitions in my high school. I didn't know much about politics. I didn't know much about building power, so I collected petitions and I handed it to my school principal, who I guess in his head might have thought, I don't control gun laws, but thank you. But that was the earliest time that I really was working on building power and using power, especially with young people. And now I found myself here in the United States Congress, and I'm very proud of the work that we've been doing. The first bill I introduced was to create a federal office of gun violence prevention, something that our country has never had, not until about a few weeks ago. And this is important. We lose 100 lives a day due to gun violence. The leading cause of death for a child in this country is to be shot with a bullet. And I think that is an incredible failure of our government and of this country. And believe that when we're losing so many lives due to gun violence, it's a daily problem, so it's going to require an agency that works on daily solutions, coordinating amongst all the different federal agencies that work on this, from HHS to DOJ, we have the ATF, even the Department of Education has a stake in this. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so the first bill I filed was to create a federal office of gun violence prevention. But I knew as a freshman in the House minority, it would be difficult to get it through. In fact, some conversations I had with Republicans on the House floor, privately they told me, Maxwell, listen, it sounds like a good bill, but you got a gun bill last year. We passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. You're not gonna get a gun bill for a long time. And it discouraged me because we're still losing lives. in this community and across the entire country. So we knew we had to be creative and had to think outside of the box. And as an organizer, we do something called power mapping, where you map what's the power we have, what's the power we want, who's the opposition, how do we get around it? And we looked at the administration and said, we have power in the presidency of the United States. So we worked with the White House. We told them about the bill. We've been pushing and pushing and pushing. And a few weeks ago, I get a call from the White House that says, Maxwell, we love your bill. We want to implement it via executive action because of the president's commitment to ending gun violence. And so it was the honor of a lifetime, a few days later, to stand alongside the Vice President and the President of the United States in the Rose Garden to announce the creation of the Federal Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And you know, it's still hitting me. I had so many colleagues who came to me after and said, Maxwell, I want to let you know it's not normal for a freshman member of the minority to stand along the President of the United States as he implements a law that you introduced that hadn't been passed yet and makes it a reality through executive order in your freshman term, less than a year into your freshman term. And that's not a testament just to me, but to our amazing staff, to the amazing advocates and organizers, and to the work that you're doing in empowering voters in Orange County and across the entire state and across the entire nation. Our leaders are listening. And you know, this job, there are many different things we do, legislating, voting, etc. But at the end of the day, this job description is in the title: representative, being an advocate, being an organizer. And that's how we got that got that win, through creative organizing. And I'm very proud that we were able to deliver that. Not just that, but over $2 million so far that we're tracking, that we're able to get here to Central Florida for community violence intervention, which is something I really campaigned on. That's really important to me. And there's a lot more work to do. You know, something else we're dealing with here in the state of Florida is the rise of far-right extremism and far-right fascism in the governor's mansion. But I know we like to talk a lot about Ron DeSantis, but we got to take a step back and look at the entire apparatus, from school board seats to his administration, to members of the state legislature, and to businesses and corporate entities that empower him to erase LGBTQ plus youth, to erase, not just erase, but work to change Black history, and to make Florida less safe for all of our people. And in this moment, we have to be thinking about what are we going to do as leaders, as community leaders, as organizers and advocates to fight against it. When I was running for Congress, I would always say I'm running to fight for our people. And I remember a few times in debates and in forums that a few of my opponents that would say, well, we don't need a fighter, we need someone who's going to go to DC to work. And it always was really interesting to me, because I'd look around and see trans kids being erased and targeted, people going out and hunting Black people, and then I'd see our leaders embrace the ideology that has pushed the far extreme to hurt our people. And I always thought, as an organizer, that requires a fight. And we are in a fight right now. And guess what? Not only am I fighting, but we're working, bringing back money, being successful in implementing our legislation. And I think we're doing a great job of representing the people of Central Florida. And there's a lot more work we need to do. And I just thank you to everybody so much for all the support that you've given our office. You know, we're working with the administration to ensure that their presence is felt in Florida, and they're listening. The Secretary of Education has already been in Orlando multiple times. The Vice President has been in Florida almost more than many of the other states, been in Florida a lot. They're putting resources in Florida on the campaign side. And we're pushing to go even further. What more can the Department of Education, what more can the Department of Justice do to ensure that they're protecting people here in Florida? Because it's not just about Florida. The rise of fascism is both global and local, and domestic, going around the entire country. And when we stop it here, we save it. We save the nation, and we stop it from going around. And so there's a lot of work we need to do there. Last thing I'll say to wrap it up, you know, the last 9 months in Congress have been the longest 2 years of my life. I'm tired of being a part of history, and what I mean by that is there have been so many moments where we hear this thing going on in Congress that we're living through has never happened before. It's history, but a lot of times it's not something good; it's something negative. Whether it was waiting a few days to get sworn in because we couldn't elect a Speaker of the House and had to do it 15 times. I stood up 15 times and said, Hakeem Jeffries. But and then I got sworn in at 2 a.m. on a Friday night. That's not the type of history we should be making. Whether it's far-right Republicans holding the possible default of our nation at hostage to take away food stamps from people, to take away money from Social Security, that's not the type of history that we should be proud of. Or whether it's vacating the speaker's chair, which is a very solemn and sad thing that happened in the United States Congress. But let's be clear, the reason it happened is because the Republican majority, they're just not ready to govern yet. And that is not history we should be proud of. And so the work is there. We'll continue to fight with and for you in the United States Congress and here at home. I also have to give a shout out to our amazing district team. We have mobile offices in Bithlo where we've helped so many people. We're working on launching more mobile offices across the entire district. We're excited about a mobile office we're working on that's going to be launched at UCF to help students specifically through student debt problems and figuring out ways that we can really show people how government can work for them. And so without further ado, I'll kick it back or over to Scott Maxwell. I appreciate you all for being here. We're dedicated to making this work in person in the future. And please, continue to do the amazing work you're doing on League of Women Voters and ensuring that democracy is open to everybody. Because let's be clear, I go to DC and a lot of the work we do is to work on compromising, coming together with people who disagree with us to figure out a way forward. But let's be incredibly clear, democracy is not something we can agree to disagree on. Thank you so much.
Well, whether you're left or right, you have to sort of admire his optimism. I expect Washington, D.C. to thoroughly crush that optimism, stomp it to pieces before Christmas this year. But right now, it is very good to see. And he's right, obviously, that everybody from all parties should agree that government should be working for the people. Too often what I see, what you see, is government working for special interests. The interests who are not only writing the checks, but literally writing the legislation. You've seen it here before, like efforts to neuter solar, who are actually written by the energy companies. They hand a check, they hand the legislation, and then it gets passed through the bill. That's the kind of thing that we need to stop. Another thing I really like about Frost is that he does represent that fresher, younger perspective, because I think that's something else that people on both sides of the aisle can agree on. We need a new generation of leaders. Whether it's Dianne Feinstein or Mitch McConnell, or frankly, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, we need the next generation of leaders to come up. And that's why I was so glad to meet the guys from the Rollins Democracy Club for being here. And they were all nice enough to lie to me and tell me they read the newspaper. So thank you. Thank you, guys. That's going to have some street cred with my own kids who don't read the damn paper. I thought I would rattle off a few Florida-specific topics where I think more optimism is needed, where I think we're having real problems, and one of them is one of the things that Maxwell Frost just mentioned. That is the current state of division and, frankly, intolerance in this state. Now, I'm not going to say that politics in America or Florida is harsher or more divided than it's ever been, because I've been doing this for about 3 decades now, and people often say, well, politics has never been this bad. And I'm like, dude, Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton. I mean, we have a history of some pretty nasty stuff going down in this country. The first one, was vice president. The other one was secretary of the treasury, and they tried to kill each other. So, yeah, we got a long history of tough. But what I have never seen, particularly in the state, is it never been this personally mean, this divisive, and frankly, this intolerant. And intolerance is really being practiced with pride lately. And I've been candid in my column in saying that I believe a lot of that intolerance is being waged at the highest levels of this state government, particularly by our governor, who is constantly demagoguing issues like drag queens and transgender teenagers. We have real issues in this state. If you have not looked at your property insurance bill lately, you should. And this is not just about, darn, it's costing more money. We have more people going bare naked, having absolutely no coverage on their home, which is by far and away their single largest investment than we've ever had in this country in any modern time. And we also have people who are losing their homes because they cannot afford bills that were $1,000, then $2,000, now $8,000. I'm on Citizens right now. We have no business being on Citizens. We live about 2 miles in there. We're nowhere near the coast, and we got one of those notifications that said we could opt for the private sector, which was about $8,500. And I do not live in a house like some of the rest of you. It should not be $8,500. But you all know this, but while we have all these problems going on, we have a governor who is sending the state police to raid a theater owned by Orlando's nonprofit Philharmonic Orchestra, mind you, simply because the orchestra rented out their hall, which they rent out about 3 times a week, to one group that had drag queens performing. And it wasn't just about taking a stand. The state has, and I believe is continuing, to financially try to kneecap the Orlando Philharmonic by taking away their liquor license, which is one of the main sources of revenue. Ann's nodding. She knows. She's involved. And by the way, Ann, I should tell you, Murrah was so nice enough. She came to me at the beginning of this and said, I'll have you know I delayed my flight so I could hear you. And I said, I am so honored. She said, it only cost $9. So people, you are getting at least $9 worth of wisdom here today. But to get back to the Philharmonic, just to close the loop on that, the governor sent the state police. The state police went there and filed in their report. They were sent to investigate what was allegedly illegal lewd behavior in front of minors, and the police said that did not happen. There's a report that said what was accused of happening here did not happen, and the action against the Philharmonic has still been going on. That is all. And it's not just that. There's also a law about drag queens. We have Hamburger Mary's in Orlando leading the fight against that. And I think this is all, I would argue, for 2 reasons. One, it is to distract from the real problems, the ones that we've admitted. And do not forget one of the ugliest nuggets that I think a lot of people forget. The House sponsor of the Don't Say Gay parental rights bill was soon after that passed indicted for PPP loan fraud himself. When I tell you that I think some of these people are screaming about marginalized communities to detract from their own flaws, and in some cases personal demons, I would say, I think that's really what's happening. And the other thing they're trying to do is build support by fear-mongering. And this is a tactic as old as politics itself. It's to tell an audience that they're coming for your children, or your guns, or your religion, and you need protection. You need someone strong like me who is going to stand as a bulwark between you and those people who don't look like you or maybe think like you. And that's what I'm trying to say when I say that I think politics in this state is nastier and uglier than it's been before. I've written about politics for 25 years in this state now and written a column for about 23. And I've seen a lot of ugliness, and I write about it, and I go home and go to the next day. It's weighed on my soul more in the past 2 years than I think it has, because I've talked to the people who are impacted, who are trying to be, as Maxwell said, erased. And I think there's a lot better way to build a coalition. And the thing is, you all have seen the impact, not just in the lawmakers. Because the hate mongers could not be happier. There's a reason we're seeing more neo-Nazi rallies. This is 2023, and we have neo-Nazis rallying in Altamont Springs, out at UCF, in front of the gates of Walt Disney World. And there's a reason they're doing it, because these people feel empowered. They are hearing people at the highest level not saying outright Nazi things, but read from a book that says hatred is okay. And I often tell my Jewish friends, you don't get to stand by while they demonize gay folks and then wonder why it is that there's another group trying to demonize Jewish folks. This is something that has been practiced for a long time. It has been legitimized. So I do believe this wave of glorified intolerance has emboldened this kind of divisive thinking in a way we haven't seen in a long time. But I want to move on to something else. I submit it is actually changing the face of Florida. It is changing the DNA of who this state is. A generation ago, Florida was a genuinely purple state. We had Mitt Romney and Obama were fighting neck and neck. We had George Bush and Al Gore. It is not that way of recent. It was a 20-point margin of victory, basically across the board for Republicans in the last election. I've always thought government does a bit better divided. I've never covered divided in Florida. It's been pretty one-sided, but it is not. So you have to ask yourself why. Well, one thing, Republicans have done a better job of getting their folks out to vote, getting them rallied. You can argue, debate the reason, but that's one reason. But the other thing is I do believe we're changing the fabric because there's a different group of people that's seeing this thing and now moving to Florida. There's something there's something more Floridian about the Ron DeSantis, Matt Gaetz, Donald Trump style of politics that's attracting people. And it's all over the state. You've got Gaetz in the Panhandle. You got Trump down at Mar-a-Lago. If you're not familiar with Southwest, it's Tucker Carlson, Michael Flynn. And these folks are very good about sort of emboldening and welcoming everyone to come to Florida. And good on them. They know how to build a coalition. So we have that happening on one hand. And on the other hand, we're losing people. And this is genuine. It's hard to quantify right now, but it's not just anecdotal. One of the things that we are hearing, I hear from a lawyer in Tampa who said he had a wonderful career practice, but that his husband said, we just can't live in this state anymore. Now they live in New Hampshire. There are multiple rocket scientists, and I do mean literal rocket scientists, who've left the Space Coast because they don't feel welcome. And we're seeing it more from our next generation, including my own daughter. My daughter is 23 years old. She grew up in Florida. She was educated in Florida at Flagler College. She had her first job in St. Augustine. She is now working in Sarasota. Florida. And just last week, she said, Mom and Dad, I don't know where I'm going to go, but I think I need to leave Florida. She said, I might just go across the Georgia line. I said, you better go a lot further than that. It's like fireworks stands and Klan meetings just across the line. So you need to probably head to Atlanta or Savannah or something else. But things are changing here. And the other thing that I think that's sort of getting out there, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is this sort of whacked out version definition of the word freedom. Because let me say that I think government censorship is one of the things that really gravely concerns me. When my kids were in school, I wanted them to hear and read everything they could. And I want to be very clear, including things that I disagreed with. In high school, my son had a very conservative teacher who offered extra credit to her students, and this was at Winter Park High School, who offered extra credit to any of her students who were willing to read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Extra credit, the only kids who could get that. Now, I don't know if most of you may be familiar with Atlas Shrugged. If you're not, it's sort of the Bible for the Rush Limbaughs of the world. I didn't think it was Pulitzer material, but when my son said the teacher's offering extra credit, do you think I fumed to the principal and said, ban this book? Do you think I marched down to the school board and asked them to stop other kids from reading it? I said, son, read the book, and if you have any questions, ask me. And that was the end of that conversation. We've got censorship is not freedom. And if you want to deny your children the ability to read a book at school, that is absolutely your legal right. But don't try to deny mine, and yours, and everybody else's. And while we're at it, as Maxwell said, stop trying to sanitize history lessons either. Some parts of history were absolutely ugly, and unless you come to terms with that, we're not going to learn from it. All right. So I also wanted to mention one thing that just to counter, there are a lot more people moving here. I think a different texture of people than used to be here before. But one thing I want to stress, because I think it's one of the sort of biggest bogus narratives out there, is that Florida is growing faster than ever before. We are not. This state is still, it's a distinction that might not make sense. We are one of the fastest growing states in America. We have always been, since air conditioning came along, Florida has always been one of the fastest growing states in America for the same reason Arizona is, under Democratic governors, under Republican governors. But over recent years, our population growth has been closer to about 1%, where it was up to 4 and 5% annually before. So yes, Florida is growing fast, but we're actually at a low point in terms of population growth. So the next time you hear that, the growth just tends to be more conservatives coming in and progressives moving out. And frankly, hate to dampen Maxwell's enthusiasm, I don't see much that indicates that's going to change. Which means that if Democrats want to have any chance, or NPAs, which by the way I actually am, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, they're going to have to do something different. All that said, it's worth noting something I think most of you already know. you are in an increasingly red voting state. Orange County is supremely blue. We're talking like Portland level blue. I think a lot of people don't realize this, that there are not only more Democrats than Republicans in Orange County, there are more NPAs than Republicans in Orange County, and there aren't many places like that. So that's kind of one of the things I like about the area that we cover. I write for an audience at the Sentinel that has super blue Orange County, has super red Lake County, and has who knows what the hell's going on in Osceola and Seminole County. They seem to be going through an identity crisis, the likes of which they can't get surgery for, I think, in this state anymore. I will want to go ahead and disclose that I am one of the people, I'm not a big fan of party politics, and this does not make some of my partisan liberal friends. I am an NPA. I have always been. I don't care for the party system, and I've seen too many people, this is one of the reasons, I've seen too many people from both parties defend obviously bad behavior simply because the bad actors shared their party affiliation. That is not to say both parties are created equal. They are not. It's not even close. But if I had a magic wand, I would actually remove party labels from a ballot, which is something that the state of Washington explored with, under the hopes that it would force people to read more about the candidates. I think, and I sometimes talk about to my blue friends, I think my blue friends would win on the issues if there weren't as many R's and D's next to people's names. But I like the idea of forcing folks to get out there and research the candidates versus just, yeah, that. Oh, thank you. I was stuttering and somebody gave me pity applause. Thank you for that. Oh, yeah. And the last thing is, for people who really diehard support the party system, I like to channel my Dr. Phil and say, well, let me ask you, how's that working out for you? I mean, are you seeing in Tallahassee what you think should be implemented on a statewide basis in Florida? Do you think Washington, D.C. is working like a well-oiled machine? I think if it was, you'd have two people speaking up here instead of one today. But before we wrap up, and I'm going to take some questions at the end of this, I thought we'd talk about a few local issues that are really pretty bipartisan in my estimation. Because one of the harshest columns I've written in recent weeks was actually targeted at the largely Democratic Board of County Commissioners. And this has to do with one of my, pet peeves, and that has to do with hotel taxes. Yeah. You know you are in a wonky group of people when you say hotel taxes and people go, oh. Y'all are a little weird, but you're my kind of weird, so I like that. Most of you are probably familiar with the fact that Orange County has dire needs. No, that wasn't a play on his name. I didn't think about that. That wasn't that. D-I-R-E has seriously distressing needs. And starting with transit. Our transit is a joke in this state. We have a rail system that only runs up and down. That's weird. Sometimes you're around something so often that you forget how weird it is. It's weird to just have a line and consider that to be your rail system. It only doesn't run on weekends. It doesn't run on nights. I mean, I don't know who that's for. The bus system, if you can believe it or not, is actually worse funded than the rail system. We have people who clean hotel rooms on I Drive, can't afford to live anywhere near there, so they're out in rural Orange County, and they have to take 3 transfers. It's 3 hours a day, and that's not even the longest. That's like a pretty standard thing to get there. The best statistic I've ever heard to show you how bad the bus system in Central Florida is that Walt Disney World has more buses covering its property than Lynx has covering all 3 counties it serves. And why is that? Because Walt Disney cares about its customers. I'm going to submit that I came here 25 years ago and local leaders were saying, you know what, we should probably have a dedicated funding source for buses. It's 25 years later and there is still no dedicated funding source for buses. I've argued that hotel taxes should be something that could serve as that funding, and there's absolutely a nexus to tourism. I think it was today's newspaper, they were talking about the next route spur for Sunrail should go from the airport to I Drive and Universal. Well, who the hell is that serving? I mean, that is a tourist route. There's a completely makes sense to use hotel taxes for that money. We also have, one of the worst affordable housing crisis in America. And yet what did our, again, mostly Democratic, 6 out of 7, Orange County Commission just vote to do? To again expand the convention center. The convention center is 7 million square feet. That's not me like doing Austin Powers, like 1 billion. It's actually 7 million square feet. To put that in perspective, it's bigger than the Pentagon. To put that in perspective in local terms, think about one of the biggest buildings I could think of, the Mall of Millennia. The Mall of Millennia can fit in the convention center 6 times. This building is rarely fully occupied. They are often having to give discounts, sometimes pay groups to come in there, and it almost always runs a deficit. Giving more space to the convention center is not going to solve the problem. The argument that local folks have is, well, that's what the state law says. We have to spend that money on tourism things. Who the heck do you think wrote these laws? They were championed by local leaders and passed by state ones. We have local officials who slap handcuffs on themselves and then say, oh, our hands are tied. And one of the things I've tried to stress, and that I think most people have come to appreciate, is that most cities in America don't do it like this, including other tourist cities. The way I got to appreciate this was 20 years ago when I first started writing about it, when everybody here was saying, well, hotel taxes can only be sent to bring in more tourists on the convention center, on Visit Orlando, who's got like an $80 million budget. Do you know Visit Orlando's budget is bigger than Visit Florida's now? It's because we have all this money and we don't know what to do with it. So we keep funneling it to the same old places. People around here said, well, you have to spend it on tourism. And then somebody finally said, you know, Vegas doesn't spend it on tourism. And I said, what's that? And they said, yeah, Vegas, they collect just as much hotel. They're our #1 competition for conventions, for everything. So 20 years ago, I went out to Vegas. And you know what I did? I visited the elementary schools that were built with their hotel taxes. I drove down the roads that were built with Las Vegas's hotel taxes. I visited the parks that were built with hotel taxes. This is my God, that city's tourism was controlled by the literal mob, and they broke free of that. But Mickey, no, we got no chance here with them. And it's not just there. There are other cities, Phoenix and Atlanta, that spend their hotel taxes on things like jails. But there's a real public safety impact having a tourism population visiting every day that strains our police and our jails. Phoenix, Atlanta, all these other cities do this. I believe there's no greater reflection of the power of special interests in Central Florida controlling politicians than this one. And the last thing I'll mention on that is that we haven't polled this in quite a while because, frankly, we don't have money for polling anymore. But every time we polled this issue, it was like the gun issue. It was overwhelmingly where citizens said, why would we tie our own hands? And my favorite example was at the Chamber of Commerce Hobnob, which is, I mean, you can't get a more insidery group of people than the Chamber of Commerce Hobnob. They used to have straw polls at this thing. And one year, the Chamber of Commerce made the mistake of polling the attendees at the Hobnob and said, do you think we should diversify the way we spend hotel taxes on things like cops and schools? And it was like 70% of those Chamber of Commerce people said, oh, hell yeah, we should. They quit doing the straw poll after that. But this is one where the controlling interest is the special interest, who, as I'm sure some of the elected officials around here know, if you want an endorsement from the Central Florida Hotel Lodging Association, you trek down there very early, and one of the first things they ask you is, do you guarantee you will never support diversifying the hotel tax spending? And that's how you get a mostly Democratic Board of County Commissioners not pushing to spend those taxes in other ways. So that's a local issue that I care a lot about. We're going to get to questions in just a minute. There are some other topics we could discuss. Voucher schools. I feel like I just broke wind or something. Yeah, and I actually believe, and there are a lot of aspects of choice I believe in. If you visit United Cerebral Palsy's school, their system of schools, I believe that organization is serving children who have not been properly served before. That's a charter school, by the way, not a voucher school. But what we have in this state is just the Wild West. I'm just going to say it, it's a shit show when it comes to voucher schools. There is no regulation or accountability. Our reporters have visited, this is not an exaggeration, our reporters have visited more voucher schools than the Department of Education has to see what is going on. And what they have found is they found that schools hiring teachers that don't have college degrees, they don't have high school degrees. Teachers goes in quotes there. They found schools that refuse to serve kids who are gay, who refuse to serve kids whose parents are gay, who refuse to serve kids who have disabilities. They actually have written policies that if you can't walk on your own, you can't come to our school. If you have autism, you are Asperger's, you can't come to our school. Public schools don't have that choice. They don't get to say, nah, you seem like a lot of work to take care of. Voucher schools. Beyond that, we have found schools that teach fiction in their history books, schools that hire criminals. And the reason we have all this is because there's virtually no accountability. Once you get that voucher and you're on a state-approved school list, and by the way, these schools are all state-approved to be on this list, the state says, our hands are clear. And what we found, and you're going to see a story, not to spoil an investigation we're going to have coming up, a lot of the people who get upset are the parents of these voucher kids. At the end of a year, they say, oh my God, my kid learned nothing. Now your teacher gave me straight A's, said that Johnny was a D student when he was in a public school, but now that he's at Angels Academy, he's made nothing but A's, and then he took the SAT and barely got the credit, for signing his name. We've had teachers that say there's no lunch provided when they said it was lunch. We've had parents come and say that we saw kids running around. Every one of these complaints, I should say everyone, almost every one, the state's response is, that's not our job. That's what choice is. If you feel like your kid got hosed, you should choose another school. That kid's lost a year. And that becomes all of our problems, by the way. Oh, I got sucked myself down a wormhole. Yeah, I was saying things I wasn't going to talk about. Voucher schools, we can talk about ethics, we can talk about the segmentation of news, the rise of pay-for-play websites, but I want to wrap up so we can do some questions. And I thought I would take a page from Maxwell Frost and try to return to optimism instead of my normally crusty ways. And I am a big fan of the league, and I'm not just saying that, I think you all know that. And I do not ever read my own columns because they're painful to get through the first time quite often. But I am going to read you something I wrote, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. When the league put together a book. Some of you may have it. It was on your anniversary, I think it was, Gloria. I don't remember what anniversary it was. 80 years anniversary. And because there were very few other people in town who have a column, I'm the only one, frankly, who left anymore. Me and Mike Bianchi, and you all didn't want Mike Bianchi to write for your book. I wrote a foreword for the book, and I thought I wanted to just read you a little bit of what I said in that foreword for the League of Women Voters book. I still remember a time when a Florida legislator was ranting to me about the League of Women Voters. It was just a phone call, but he was so angry I could practically feel the spittle flying from his mouth through the receiver. He was furious at the League, furious that members were making him look bad, and furious that they were forcing him to court. That's when it hit me. These women must be making a hell of a difference because they were making this politician so mad. And they were. The Orange County League of Women League of Women Voters has become a tour de force in politics and policy throughout Central Florida and the state, and I truly believe democracy is better because of it. The League has shaped policy, forced reform, informed the electorate, and encouraged civic activism and participation. That would be pretty remarkable all by itself, but it's even more remarkable when you consider that less than 2 decades ago, Orange County's League was struggling just to attract members. In fact, some people back then were even critical of the League for being lackluster. I know, because I was one of those people. The year was 2002, and I was writing about how Central Florida lacked leadership, vision, and activism. And searching for organizations that I thought might effectively lead this community in the future, I mentioned that the League seemed like it might be an organization that could do more than it was doing at the time. Now, some people read criticism and argue, but not the League. League members took that criticism as a challenge and an opportunity to fill a void, and boy, have you. Today, everyone knows who the League is and that it's effective. The League is effective because its members are fearless and informed and vocal and growing in numbers. In a Twitter-styled society where much of the world speaks in 140-character sound bites, the League still digs down into the crevices of public policy to study the intricacies, to find flaws, and to work for reform. The League also isn't afraid to speak the language of politicians who understand sometimes only one thing: litigation. I know the bulk of what the League will accomplish is yes to come, and that this community and state is better for it. So in closing, I want to share the words of Margaret Mead, a statement that has become something of a guiding light, I know, for many of you at the League. Quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." I believe that, and I want to thank you for your efforts. So thank you for having me. Well, that's good. All right, that was generous of you. And now I think we're going to take some questions. Is that right? Some Q&A. You can ask anything. If you dislike me, you want to know what's wrong at the paper, bring it on. I'll be happy to field that question to Dean over there.
Okay, members, come up and ask questions. I'm sure you all have some. This is the first time. You must have answered everything. Oh, here we go. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Marty Sullivan. I serve as a commissioner for the city of Winter Park. Repeat myself, sorry. But my question regarding gun safety is, what can I, as a commissioner, do to promote gun safety? And I was a little concerned because a couple of my fellow commissioners were here, and it might violate the Sunshine Law, but it won't, because I've already brought this up in our commission meetings. What can we do? And some of the things I have suggested is, do not allow guns in the event center. Anybody carrying here today? Do not allow guns in the library. Do not allow guns in the community center. Require safe storage of guns at home. So here's my question. What can we do? Our hands are tied. If we do this, we are subject to being kicked off the commission, kind of like a district attorney, and a $5,000 fine. So our hands are tied. What can we do?
Yeah, and I think the short answer is you are largely tied. I'm going to there may be a municipal lawyer out here who can answer this or address this better. I think that is another time where the only language that's going to make a difference is litigation, because preemption law has passed in telling you that you can't do that. If memory serves, and maybe Scott or somebody knows, that has been challenged, but I don't believe it's been thoroughly challenged on all fronts. I'm not sure that I believe the state, and I've heard other attorneys say, has the ultimate authority to overrule all home rule and what can happen. And I've generally seen counties and cities be a little meek about standing up when the state tries to trample over their rights. So you might want to ask your own attorney if he feels the final word has been settled on that. But you're right that the state has made it very difficult to pass local laws. It started, some of you may remember, with gun show loopholes. Orange County was among the counties that wanted to pass a law that said, once again, that virtually everybody supports. It says, if you want to buy a gun, you have to go through a background check, no matter where you're buying the gun. And that was one of the things that set up the challenge. But I don't think it's been challenged on every front in my estimation. So.
Hi, since there is somebody behind me. I'm going to try to get away with two quick ones.
Okay.
I'm Ginger Mundy, and anyway, so the first one is the Orange County Commission. You were talking about that. They just voted themselves a pay raise. And my thought on that, and I apologize if you've written a column about it, I do read it, but my thought was, why not expand, rather than increase their salaries, why not expand the number of commissioners to have better representation as our population grows? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And the second one is them shrinking the number of judicial circuits.
Okay. And by the way, I feel like Liberace with this golden microphone up here. That could get me banned in this state too, couldn't it? I'll start with the judicial districts because that's simple. I believe so much of life is just about math. That is about trying to water down progressive areas like Orange County. You cannot do the math. How many districts do we have now? How many districts? You cannot. Yeah, there's some judges around here. Let's put you on the spot. You cannot do the math and not have blue districts the way it is. The only way you can bleach a district to become red, to use an example like Orange County, is extend it beyond Orange and Osceola to have it become something like Orange, Osceola, Lake, and Polk. Then all of a sudden you don't have an Aramis Ayala or a Monique Worrell. So that's pretty blatant. The only potential saving grace is that there are some conservative judges and sheriffs who think this is a bad idea because it's going to weaken their home sphere of influence, and they're right about that. But I kind of think they're going to get pulled aside and explain to them why it's to their benefit. So yeah, that is about weakening the handful of prosecutors that have been elected. And what was your other question? Oh, their salaries. I have not written about that, Ginger, so thank you for that. And I will tell you, I'm probably on the opposite side of the public sentiment on this. I do not have a real problem with a decent salary for elected officials, and I will tell you why. Often you get what you pay for. Tallahassee legislators are paid, last I checked, they'll correct me if I'm wrong, $29,900 a year. And you know who can afford to do that full time? No one. So the average net worth has gone up and up and up, and so that people are already worth, I think, God, last time, it used to be $1 million, and now I think it's like 2 or 3, which good for them, but this is not representative of the people who can't afford to pay their property insurance bills. I would rather pay somebody. I also don't like having people who are desperate for money in public office. That's a bad combination. So I think their timing was poor. I also think, by the way, anytime a board votes for a raise, they should make it only effective with the next board so that they are not getting the money directly. But generally, I don't have a problem with public officials getting a decent salary because I think we shut out the school teachers, the cops, and all the other people who don't come from institutional money from serving.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Sarojini Lal, and I am a new Floridian. I recently relocated here from Southern California. And when I was in California, I worked for one of the most progressive members of the California State Legislature. So you can imagine I have a little bit of culture shock coming
We
here.
still have palm trees, though.
Yes, at least that's familiar. And lizards, lots of lizards. So my question is about local news, because I come from a town, Glendale, which is right outside of Los Angeles, that had a wonderful hometown newspaper, which basically became defunct. And the same thing has happened to a lot of newspapers across Southern California. And local news is so essential to keeping our elected officials honest and transparent and keeping government transparent. So my question is, how do we keep local news strong and healthy? Because it's been an absolute boon to me as a new Floridian to have the Orlando Sentinel to read every day to learn about this community.
Thank you, and you will get your check after this.
See me after, yeah.
So this is actually a lot of what we talked about the last time I was here, but most of you all probably don't remember that because hell, I don't remember that. Local news is a real problem. The number one thing you can do is subscribe, but I'm going to be very candid with you. As you said at the beginning, unfiltered. We do not make it easy. We are bad. My company is owned by a hedge fund. We jack up your circulation prices. We make it incredibly difficult for you to change anything. If you fuss enough, sometimes your bill will go down. We do not provide any way for you to contact anyone locally, which is why, and I've counted, I'm not making this up, I have responded to 3,000 readers who have written me with circulation complaints through the years. No, not through the years, through the last year. I mean, it keeps me up at night. So you can subscribe to your newspaper, and I think we need to have more locally owned newspapers. The good thing about this community is when we went up for sale, there was more than one person in this community with a lot of money who stepped up and said they wanted to purchase the Orlando Sentinel, and they put through good money to do it. The problem is we're still profitable. And the hedge funds want to extract the money that we are making through loyal subscribers and use them to fund their other enterprises. So the simple answer, subscribe to your local newspaper and share your local newspaper. In fact, I think one of the last things, I think this is our last question, that Gloria was asking me to is there one more? Okay.
That's the last question.
All right. Well, then I'll segue into this last point, is what can people do in general? You can subscribe to local news sites, but you can also share the information you have, because man, disinformation and misinformation is one of the biggest problems we've got going on. We've got this segregated news society where people don't have to get the news that's actually happening in the world. They're able to get the news, I put in quote, that fits their own narrative. People who, it's easier to only hear things that tell you what you want to hear. You get to bathe in what I call the warm waters of confirmation bias. If you only want to hear something that will never upset you, there is a news source. So we all have to share the information that we know is reliable. And we need to call out the information that's not. My next column, Sunday, is probably going to be about the state of pay-for-play journalism. Once again, journalism goes in quote. I guarantee you have read a piece that has been shared with you in your timeline feed that was run by an organization that was paid to promote the politicians, and they do it on the left and the right. There are entire news organizations that we've written about that were set up by like one or two companies, not to name any, but Sugar and FPL. There are entire news organizations that's what they do. So we can all do a better job of vetting our news sources and sharing the news sources and getting people like my kids' age to read. I know you all are already doing all that, and I can't thank you enough for that. And on that note, I'll just say thanks for having me.
Okay, we would like everybody to please stay seated because we have some announcements.
Boy, lucky me to follow Scott. Thank you all for being here today. I really can't begin to describe how we all felt about your tireless work, Scott, to keep freedom of speech important and to defend our democracy. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, Maxwell Frost, but thank you so much for all that you said and all that you do and all that you write. We appreciate it in this organization. So my job is to make sure we all understand the calls to action. And I heard two that we aren't doing. I don't need to talk about voting. I was going to talk about voting, but Gloria said, we're all members of the League of Women Voters. Everybody is registered, and you all know to vote. If you live in Orlando or you live in House District 35, November 7th is Election Day this year. So what are the calls to action? Number one, we got our marching orders. This league does not have a committee on gun safety. And I am looking at my Moms Demand Action friend, Linda Coffin, and she's shaking her head. So Tiffany, we need one. And that's number one. Number two, I hadn't counted on this, but Scott gave it to me in the last 30 seconds of his presentation. We need to think outside the box in this league and find a way to share factual information on this local community. I'm not sure how we'll do it. We'll need a new committee. We'll need some new leadership. Hint, hint, are you volunteering? Raise your hand. But we have a responsibility. Our mission says defend democracy and empower voters. We are not empowering voters if we don't give them the information they need. And that is something that's on us. And I say we now have two calls to action. Thank you, Scott. There's a third one that's close to my heart. You have on your table and on the screen a QR code or a link to an evaluation. We want to hear from you. What do you think about our program? What should we be doing in the future? We can only do better and improve our product if we hear from our consumers. So please give us an evaluation. Also, now I'd like to segue into a personal thing. We have an amazing Hot Topics committee. I like to refer to them as our dream team. So please, if you serve on that committee, would you please stand and be recognized? That's our dream team. We also have a fabulous caterer, Cuisiniers, who puts up with a lot of our craziness to deliver this kind of lunch in just a few minutes to all of you today. So wherever you are, Kate, thank you very much to you and your team. And right along with our caterer is the Winter Park Event Center staff, Alexandra and Joel. They have worked tirelessly to help us figure out how to reconfigure this room to fit everybody in here today and still make the fire marshal happy. So thank you very much to them. We have lots of events coming up. You can take a look at the screen, but I think the most important thing is to make sure that you know that, I jumped ahead. I'm not following my own script. Sorry. We have Hot Topics Overtime in the library at 1:15. I believe Charlie Williams is going to be facilitating, and we'd like to continue this conversation. There is a lot to talk about, so please join us. Also, we have another Hot Topics coming up November 8th. This is going to be so exciting. It is artificial intelligence and elections, the good, the bad, the reality. And we are honored that the editor-in-chief has said she personally will be here, Julie Anderson. She wants to handle this. So she and our fabulous Orange County Supervisor of Elections, Bill Cowles, will be here along with Professor Aslett to discuss this important and timely hot topic. What's next? A lot of things coming up on the league, but my dear friend Pat Grierson would be telling me that I forgot if I didn't remind you of our new member orientation on Tuesday at 6 o'clock at the Winter Park Center. How many new members are here today? Well, we got a great evening for you. Please be sure you put it on your calendar and join us. Also, if you are part of our postcard project, raise your hand. I don't know if you are. There are postcard packages